Hey, I've got Bob Moore, co-founder and CEO of Crossbeam with us. Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, great to be here, Jim.
Tell me a little bit, Bob, about sort of where you are today and a little bit of background on Crossbeam.
So I'm joining you from beautiful Philadelphia, PA, and Crossbeam is headquartered here, although we're a mostly remote company normally, and obviously fully remote at the moment. We're a company that helps businesses basically get more value out of their partnerships by allowing them to answer really simple questions like, with my partners, how many customers do I have in common and who are they? Or are my sales reps currently selling to any of the same prospects that my partner's sales reps are selling to? We serve almost like an escrow service for data that sits in between the CRM systems of those companies that have alignment with each other, helps them identify opportunities to co-sell and cross-sell, and then the workflows that power those opportunities.
As we talk about sales insights today, Bob, how large is Crossbeam? How long have you been around?
Yeah, we were founded in mid-2018, so we are about 2 years old. We launched in 2019, so we've been in market maybe a year and a half, and we are 28 people today with a sales team of about 5.
Nice. Well, why don't we jump into the data? How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
So we're going to be talking about partnerships and the next big innovation around building pipeline. The two areas we want to talk about is one, what are the different insights that we're seeing across sales teams today? Want to get your perspective and your perspective at Crossbeam. And then secondly, the new strategies that we're seeing specifically around even partnerships building pipeline out. So as we jump in, the first area is we show week over week sales productivity. This is the number of meetings that we're recording. For the quarter, we saw an 8% lift, or we were down about 8% Q2 over Q1. But over the last week, we were up 5%. So we're starting to come back from the holiday period. Are you seeing some uplift on your team, week over week?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've got a bunch of factors running in parallel here. It's actually really exciting to see how little drop off there is just as the macro environment has changed so drastically. So in general, not seeing sharp declines in that March-April timeframe is probably good news for folks in our industry. But you've also got things like, for most companies, their second quarter just ended at the end of June. So you've got a very natural drop off that happens in the beginning of any new quarter while sales folks are recalibrating and doing QBRs and frankly taking vacation. And you've also got the seasonality of the summer where I think there's a lot of built-in time off that people are factoring in here. So I'm not surprised to see a dip happening at the turn of the quarter when you've also got a holiday weekend where that holiday falls on a Friday. It's like a perfect storm. So, I would expect to see a steady increases that build us back to the normal levels, but by the time we get to the September timeframe and things are full-fledged again.
Bob, what are you seeing from an energy level? Q2 took tremendous amount of energy from sales teams work through the changes to get deals over the line. As we enter Q3, what's your pulse of the sales market right now?
Yeah, I think it's that transition from being in a state of change where you have a lot more work, but you also have the benefit of kind of a jolt of adrenaline in a lot of things being new and different, into this world of how do we make this new steady state with an indefinite time horizon on it something that's actually sustainable. And I think what a lot of teams are starting to focus on more and more is the mental health of their team members, making sure that people do take those vacations and that time off, which is definitely something that most companies have seen go down in recent months, and just ensuring that we don't get to a point where the Zoom fatigue starts to actually impact the performance and the health of the people on their teams. So it's a little bit of that shift, and I think people are getting a little more zen about it in the face of the Zoom fatigue, and hopefully that adaptation will be something that we may see some adjustments still happening in this quarter, but hopefully by the end of the year we're back to a state of some feeling normal, whether it's normal or not.
It's interesting. I have been surprised with the consistency of the data, but I'm also seeing a shift right now where people are moving a lot. I don't know if you're seeing this, but when you talk to people, there is a huge change of scenery that we're seeing across the board where, virtual backgrounds, you can be anywhere. But you're really seeing people needing to get a change of pace. Are you sensing this with your own team?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, we have people, like I said, we're normally mostly remote, but the percentage of people that are currently where they normally would be is pretty low. I think there's a lot of people that have, taken the opportunity. We've got most of our team lives in cities, but I think a lot of folks have kind of taken the opportunity to get to alternate locations where they have a bit more space and a bit more kind of free range, given some of the social distancing constraints that exist. And I think that is again kind of an investment in kind of the thinking about this from a long-term just stability standpoint. So it's unsurprising, and it's something we definitely do see.
Well, it's fascinating that we have so many people moving in such significant ways, yet productivity continues to essentially hold steady. So one of the stats we wanted to share this week is looking at just the median meeting volume per AE. And what we're seeing is that the median number of meetings, 23 in the month of June, is actually on pace with exactly where we were in January. So here we have people moving cross country and all sorts of different changes of environments. What do you think is different about the meetings we're having today than what we were doing in Q1?
Yeah, I mean, I think an interesting alternate version of the question would be, if you look at March, April, May, and other seasons, I think that's conference season, right? You may expect to see a bit more seasonality, a bit less flatness, where the meeting numbers actually go up during that time period because you've just got yourself in an environment where a really high density of meetings is possible. And that's absent from this cycle. And it's almost an eerie flatness, right? You expect to have some kind of seasonality there. And it's just like this steady drumbeat of it's Groundhog Day, right? I mean, it's the thing that we're all experiencing, which is the same thing day after day after day. And thankfully, that has not resulted in a decay in activity, but somewhat eerily, it has kind of really, really stabilized. And those meetings they're fundamentally different. They're happening almost exclusively on Zoom or kind of in a virtual format. And you've got two forces battling each other. One force being people have a lot more, buyers and sellers have a lot more time on their hands because they're not traveling, because they don't have all this scaffolding around meetings that are happening. But on the other side, you've got Zoom fatigue and people trying to make sure that they're not just spending all day staring at sales calls and other kind of calls on their monitors. And I think those forces balance each other out a bit and we end up flat.
I'm curious about that. We heard a lot about Zoom fatigue, 60 days ago. That was something that we're seeing. I'm curious if you're finding, I think for myself, that's not a word I would use as much now. I think we're learning sort of how to do things a little bit differently, change up the pace. Are you still seeing that, Bob, on your side, a significant decline where the fatigue is increasing, or are we starting to adjust to this new normal?
Yeah, well, I think the fatigue can exist without necessarily directly changing the behavior, right? So you can mentally say, oh, another Zoom call, and still get on the Zoom call. And I think that there's a little bit of, for lack of a better phrase, like scar tissue that has built up in a lot of people where you've done the reps and you've got the resiliency to actually be able to handle, 6 to 8 hours of these things all day, every day. And for people that have had that happen to their workday, I think maybe that resiliency is there, and there's less of an inclination to complain about it because it's just the new normal. I would just say that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a bit of a gut instinct to try and resist adding more to the pile. Whereas, adding in another meeting or phone call in a more normal environment might be less of a burden.
That's right. You're not able to say, I'll see you in the kitchen. Let's catch up over coffee.
Exactly.
It's a 30-minute block. One of the unique things, maybe something that maybe is adding to make these calls more interesting, is we are seeing a lot more people joining the meeting. So buyers are bringing in their executives, sellers are bringing in their leadership. We're seeing an 18% increase in sellers, joining these meetings. So we're bringing more horsepower to the meetings. What's your take?
This is really neat. I think we've seen this on our team too. And again, I think it's a little bit of a factor of, there are big blocks of time that used to be occupied by other stuff that are just gone now, from particularly when you look at sales managers and people kind of in the more, middle to upper level management ranks in these sales organizations. And I think if you ask the average sales manager in a normal environment, if you had an entire other day, call it another 20% of your productivity freed up. How would you like to spend it? I think managers always feel like they wish they were on calls more. They wish that they were doing more direct coaching of their reports. They wish that they were more directly in tune with the market and what's going on the front lines. And I think that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing the ability of other folks in the organization to hop on a little more often and hop on with less friction, because things that might have previously been an in-person meeting or a walk and talk or a direct cell phone to cell phone call are now happening on Zoom just by default. It's like the default cadence, and the friction of hopping onto somebody else's Zoom call is basically zero if you can see their calendars. And I think that's materializing in this data here.
It's so enjoyable too. I know in the last week I've had more customer-facing calls. We're just joining the QBR, just joining even a fly on the wall with key customer accounts, and it is. There's a lot of joy that comes from just being a part of those interactions, which, we all do this constantly, but doing a little bit more of it and just getting into it. And I would say the tracking more laughter, tracking more fun, finding ways to actually get the whole group to enjoy, the work that we're doing. I don't know. I've found some real joy out of this in the last week of just exactly being part of this light blue bar and just getting into more. And then we share them and do coaching afterwards. But it's wonderful just to get in front of these customers.
Yeah, totally agree. Let's
look at specifically some of the new strategies to building pipeline. One of the key areas that we've looked at over the last few months is cold calls. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen is that when cold calls, initially they were down 46%. Now they're down about 20% since January, but they haven't recovered. So we moved to work at home. Cold calls have gone down. Connect rates, on the other hand, have, they've gone down, but they're still holding at about 9%. So if you get on the call, there's a good chance that you're seeing similar types of patterns on connect rates. What we have seen a big change on is emails. So the BDRs are sending significantly more emails, close to about 400 emails per week. Tell me about what changes are you seeing from an outbound perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we're very email friendly here at Crossbeam. Our cold calling outbound efforts are pretty limited, and I'd say that they're also scoped down to people where there's been at least some form of previous engagement, at least a response to an email or something else in the past, like engaging with our content marketing. So I'm not super surprised to see this. Again, it's a little bit of the, you potentially having less commuting time and less kind of other stuff junking up your calendar. Again, there's added productivity that can potentially show up, especially for people whose compensation is tied to performance. So, maybe the only thing preventing less emails from going out was the absence of more hours in the day, and suddenly there's more hours. So, email is kind of tried and true, and I think is a known performer that's a good lead into a lot of the traditional calling activities. So I think it makes sense that it would tick upward.
Bob, anything new you've had to do on the email side to sort of break through the noise, knowing that people are now receiving almost 2 times the email volume, that they were getting before? How do we stand out? How do we make sure that we're being noticed?
Yeah, on our side, we do a lot on the content marketing front. So our cold emails and frankly our warm emails are very often laced with insights that have been pulled together by our content marketing team. And those insights can be anything from, we recently had a partnerships KPI report where we surveyed many partnership leaders about how they're held accountable and what the key metrics are, and how much that's tied to compensation and how much they believe that leadership believes in these metrics. And, it really helps tell a story that makes people in these partnership roles feel heard and feel included and feel able to benchmark themselves against their peers. And that's a great foot in the door. It's a great way to kind of give before asking for anything in return. All the way through to, we actually just released our partner playbook, which is a full-length book that's basically a guide for partner managers and heads of partnerships on the strategies and tactics of building out a modern partnership program, specifically as it relates to helping partner-led sales and go-to-market. So that stuff, they're free, they're giveaways, they're things that we can do to create value before we start to ask people about opening their wallets.
Well, on the playbook aspect, and usually those are used in webinars and other patterns. One of the things that we did see a big increase on, as cold calls are down, emails are up,
Mhm.
For building pipeline, we saw a shift to virtual events. So from February to March, it was up 98%. Still today, June versus January, we're up 13%. But there's been a spike in driving traffic to webinars, virtual events, virtual conferences. Are you leveraging this as you get your playbook out there? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I can tell you we've been invited to plenty. I think that there's virtual events are valuable. Webinars have proven valuable for us, and it's kind of widely accepted that they're a great part of any kind of top of funnel playbook for companies. I think what has happened though is a very, very real saturation of these things where the virtual events that existed before, the webinars and the like, are kind of being used as a vehicle for converting in-person events into something else as well. And I think the effectiveness and the reception of those events, there's been a lot of excitement around it in the early days. But the way that they materialize, it's not the same as holding a real in-person event. The content may be very similar. There's a lot you can do to have really great content related outputs, but the social aspects are missing, the networking aspects are missing, the excitement of getting on a plane and going to another city is gone. And I don't think that it's a fair apples to apples replacement that I think a lot of events teams were hoping it would be. So, to kind of stem the bleeding of lost leads and opportunities from real in-person events, virtual events are better than nothing. But I think the innovation and creativity that needs to exist behind these virtual events really, really needs to stretch way beyond, let's do this as a webinar. And I frankly, I think that people are still figuring that out. And in the lull of the summer, you're going to see these numbers come down and sit down, until fall event season comes around and people will be swinging the bat again, hopefully in more creative ways.
Have you seen some unique creativity out there as we think about networking and building up trust and relationships? Have there been any, vendors you've worked with or partners you've worked with that have done something that kind of surprised you?
Honestly, I would love to have a really creative answer to throw at you, but my gut reaction to that question is no. I feel like people have definitely, there are a lot of different platforms out there. There's a lot of different ways to have kind of impromptu, almost like chat roulette style networking happening to kind of simulate the randomness of an event environment. But I just from a personal standpoint and in getting feedback from my team standpoint, those tools just end up not being used. And I think that the engagement on them is really low. So I think it's still an open question.
It's an opportunity. We were in a meeting yesterday. Same concept, which is what's the new way of doing these? What do people need? And again, how do we get people together and build up that level of trust that happens when you're in person?
Yeah.
One of the other key stats that was fascinating is just looking at the role of partnerships in building pipeline. And what we looked at when we look at all of the conversations, we saw a 33% increase in the mention of partnership coming up from June since February. This is a big change. Why do you think we're seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, we even saw this inside of Crossbeam. We had a blockbuster quarter last quarter where the business from a sign-up standpoint grew 55%, from a sales standpoint basically doubled over the quarter before. Nice. And I think part of what's going on behind the scenes here is that a lot of what's been taken away with the pandemic and the lockdowns has been a lot of the traditional channels through which partnership activity takes place, right? The high-fiving and backslapping of in-person events is really kind of core to a lot of partnership strategies and where a lot of the deals get done and things happen in the partner world. And that's been transitioning to this question of how can we use technology and data to actually be the tip of the spear of these partner programs. And in reality, that way of doing it can lead to much more scalability and reliability and measurability and all these other great things that you see in core sales and that you see in marketing and you see in customer success. So partnerships are kind of coming into their own in that SaaS 2.0 playbook of what are the best in class ways to go to market and to drive new sales. And it's also, that's kind of the market side of it. There's also the product side of it where we've seen in recent years in particular, the density of that network graph of partnerships, right? Like the average number of partners that the typical company has gone up quite a bit. And it's a result of the API economy really maturing and getting to a point where the ability to have interoperability and interconnectivity between software products has become easier and easier. Getting data out of various systems has become more standardized. The authentication and all the complicated mechanics of it have become more standardized. iPaaS solutions from Zapier to Tray to Workato have emerged to even further reduce that friction. And it just means that having a partner with an aligned ideal customer profile where when your tool gets used side by side with their tool, it makes both of your tools more valuable. That is so commonplace and such a huge part of the product playbook for companies today that it's only natural that now the question gets asked, how can we be using this connectivity and this network graph to drive go-to-market and to actually influence everything from conversion rates to average ticket size to number of new leads coming in the door. And that's what these partner playbooks are. That's why people are ramping them up and getting aggressive about them. And that's why we're seeing the kind of growth that you showed there.
I think it makes sense. You mentioned something earlier around seeing more customer expansion. And I think that one area where we might be seeing more focus on partnerships is how do we do more with the customers we have? How do we become partners? How do we expand them? And I think it ties into even the networking aspect, which is we're struggling as a group to build new relationships right now and to build up that level of trust. And so we're trying to do more with the existing relationships, people we had met in person before, people we had engaged. And I'm seeing this trend across our customers as well. Yeah,
totally agree. I think it's not just a lead generation story. I think it's something that's present throughout the entire customer journey and the life cycle of anybody that you're engaging with. And I think if you can add another dimension, which is, we have a friend in common, which is this partner of ours whose product you also use, or, just add more of these human dimensions of connectivity, it makes the relationship more sticky.
Bob, just as we close out, what's your perspective on Q3 2020?
Yeah, I'm excited for Q3. I think it should be a priority of anybody in a management position to make sure that your teams are as happy and healthy as they can be, and kind of putting their ability to stay sane, for lack of a better term, at the top of your priority list. And I think, if you feel like you're in a good spot with that, then there's a lot of opportunities to find openings and to go after them and to continue playing offense in this environment.
Love it. It sounds like one of the key trends is August is coming. Everybody needs to take a few days off.
Yeah, I think, yes. And for my teammates watching right now, I hope you take that to heart.
I love it. Bob, I appreciate you joining us. We do this weekly. For everybody that's listened today, go to Chorus.ai. You can go to our resources section and download the exec briefing. You can watch this episode and get full access to the content that we've shared. Bob, thanks so much. Happy